Hello, welcome to day two. Day one was quite fun. Thank you, Jim, for coming back, and thank you to Thomson Reuters today for sponsoring day two again. Please, just as a reminder, please submit some questions via the comments link. We've got to almost all of them on day one, but if you get your questions in early, we will make sure to place them throughout our time together. So thanks, Jim, for being here. And while our theme is risk even a thing anymore? We will talk about the debanking, EO, the gutting of some laws, the removal of reputational risk, etc. However, this morning, FinCEN published another advisory, which I do love. I love it when they give financial institutions things to do, things to focus on. However, along with the advisory came their financial trend analysis report, which was very interesting. So I took on the operationalization of the advisory. Jim took on the FTA on that report. So while we are going to we were supposed to kick off with some Jeff Epstein and negative news talk, but we're going to actually kick this off by talking about FinCEN's advisory and their FTA report. And while I did post details about what financial institutions should do to operationalize the first couple steps of the advisory, we can get to that if we have time, but I have a LinkedIn post on I Follow Dirty Money, so go check that out. But the most important part, the most interesting part, is the financial trend analysis report. 137,000 and change SARS, or not SARS. You know what? I'm just going to stop talking and ask you just a general question. What were your initial thoughts and feelings? And we are going to put a link to Jim's blog post in the comments because it is spectacular and you should read it. All right, Jim, what's your initial thoughts on the FTA?
So, first of all, the financial trend analyses, FTAs that FinCEN puts out, they have to do that as part of their official duties by the Section 6206 of the Anti-Money Laundering Act of 2020. And this is I think it's the 12th one they've done. They're semi-annual, and they're really good. They're great. Obviously, a ton of work goes into them, but every single one of them refers to BSA reports, which begs the question of which BSA reports. Are they SARS? Are they currency transaction reports? Are they currency and monetary instrument reports? The cross-border things? Are they 8300s? What the hell are they? Now, we think they're SARS. They look like SARS. They walk like SARS. They talk like SARS. But are they? And if they are all SARS, and you're right, it was 137,154 SARS filed in a 5-year period, a period where there were 18.6 million SARS filed, right? So this is like less than 1% of all the SARS. But if these are SARS, how did they select the 137,000? I don't know. And if it was only SARS, what the hell are we doing filing everything else if they don't relate to this kind of activity? So that was my take on it.
Yeah, and I think some of the stuff we talked about was, throughout the advisory component of it, they talk about the narco trafficking that happens in the Chinese-Mexican cartel nexus, right? That's what they're laying out. And it did make me wonder when I did read the FTA report, how they got to their data set that they kept calling it, right? The 137,000. And I totally missed that they just used that generic term BSA reports. I just immediately assumed that they were talking about SARS, but you're right, they don't define it. So it does leave you wondering about some of the usefulness, especially because we don't have drug trafficking as a checkbox on the SAR. So if drug trafficking is one of the main typologies used in this Chinese money laundering network that they're talking about, yet we don't have the checkbox for that on the SAR form, how did they get to their data set?
Yeah.
Can you talk about, if you can remember just off the top of your head, some of the percentages, because when I first saw it, I thought it was SARS, and just off the top of my head, I was doing math, and the math wasn't math, and that when I was like, wait, this is 5 years, we're averaging 3.5 to 4 million SARS a year, and we're only getting 137,000. But if you take it one step further or one step up to the BSA reports as a whole, that's insane. Like
Yeah, if you
insanely
take
not
the
useful.
the
Yeah.
BSA report, so in that 5-year period, there were roughly 100 million CTRs, roughly 18.6 million SARs. CMIRs, those are again the cross-border transportation, and the 8300s, which are large cash transactions by non-financial trades and businesses. And there's about 150,000 CMIRs every year. There's about 300,000 or so 8300s. So it's probably something north of 130 million reports filed during that period. So that's a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage. Even if it's SARS,
Yeah.
it's still 0.8% of all SARS filed. So it's a small slice, but an important slice. This is bad activity.
Yeah, it's bad activity, but inquiring minds want to know how they got to their data set, I mean,
Yeah.
and I know we talked about on day one, if we were king or queen for a day, what would we change? And, I think probably now in light of this, I say we change the SAR form to better fit with some of the national priorities, even though the national priorities will change and shift and, kind of go up or go down in order based on who's in office. I still think that the majority of the priorities, still hold true. And I think you said a couple of years ago when the priorities first came out, if everything is a priority, nothing is a priority.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's also a good point. I am thankful. I do want to say something positive. I am thankful that FinCEN has started over the last 10-ish months to put in each advisory that's published what it's linking to in the national priorities. I think that's good because I think a lot of financial institutions are waiting, like, will I ever be able to file anything other than a structuring SAR? Some of the smaller financial institutions. So any other comments you want to make on the FTA or on the advisory itself before we move on to Jeff Epstein?
No, we got to go to Jeff Epstein. Come on.
Okay. So Jeff Epstein, negative news. So we will get to reputational risk in a little bit, but we definitely need to address the interconnectedness of the debanking, EO, the negative news, adverse media, and reputational risk. They're super related. And when I say related, I don't mean like first cousin. I mean like sibling level relative. And earlier, a couple weeks ago, we were chatting and you said Jeff Epstein was not on a high risk list, but leather goods stores are. And I thought, I'm going to bring that up because that is a great juxtaposition, right? Somebody like Jeff Epstein, because we all know that Jeff Epstein is not the only one. He is not an anomaly, and neither is Ghislaine Maxwell, right? There are plenty of people like him and like her throughout the world. So why do we not have that focus, and rather we focus on leather goods stores because they are noted in the manual? Can you make it make sense?
I cannot make it make sense because it doesn't make any sense. So, first of all, what do FinCEN and the regulators say about higher risk persons, entities, activities? So we know what they're saying to their examiners, right? And those examiners are in the field, et cetera, because of the FFIEC BSA AML exam manual. Now, that manual was first published in 2005. It was updated in its entirety in 2006, 2007, 2010, and 2014. Since then, updates have been done sort of piecemeal, okay? There's a section on risks associated with money laundering and terrorist activity. Excellent. There's 27 chapters on various risks, okay? So either activities such as bulk cash, funds transfers, trade finance, etc., or types of entities and organizations. And they have chapters on charities and nonprofits, business entities, cash-intensive businesses, and my favorite, professional service providers such as lawyers and accountants. 23 of the chapters were written or last updated in 2014, and 4 were updated in 2021.
So riddle me this. How many of those chapters mention anything besides narco trafficking? Like, I don't know, the other types of trafficking, sex trafficking, organ trafficking, any other type of trafficking besides drugs and narcotics?
So like convicted sex traffickers?
Yeah. I mean, anything?
None,
Okay.
none, none. Oh, and here's a really fun fact.
Yeah.
The FFIEC exam manual does not mention human trafficking.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, right? So a junior bank examiner keen on seeing what their bank is doing about human trafficking will go into their BSA exam manual, their manual on how they examine banks, and look up for human traffickers and won't find anything.
Yeah.
Now, they could rummage around and find something in a FinCEN advisory, et cetera, but nothing in the exam manual. I think that's a gap.
Yes. Yeah. Especially when we have two boxes on the SAR form. We have one for human trafficking and one for human smuggling, yet no written guidance in the manual or the chapters. And we know, let's see, it's 2025 now. We know that the last time the exam manual, their high risk customer list type was actually updated was 2021. I know that some parts of the core of the correspondent banking chapters were updated just a few years ago, but nothing since. Like we haven't. I mean, you know, other than these advisories that have been coming out, which they have done a few on human trafficking, there's really been nothing since. Correct.
Right. Nothing since. And again, this is the manual that the examiners use to examine the institutions. And here's the real kicker, if you ask me. The chapter on suspicious activity reporting was last updated in 2014. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, since that time, we now have new value, new currency that didn't exist prior to 2014.
Yeah.
Crypto. Yeah. Well, so before we get into the topic of reputational risk, I wanted to bring up one of the questions. If we could get the question up on the screen. Did Epstein's banking relationships expose gaps in CTR SAR thresholds? And do regulators expect banks to handle PEPs differently? And I think those two questions, I mean, to me, those are two questions, but that really speaks to some of the convicted human trafficker issues. I mean, I think, reading through the Deutsche order by the state of New York several years ago, I think the thing that it exposed for me, and I don't know, you may have a different view from a CTR SAR threshold in our first discussion on day one, but for me, one of the things that stood out from that order and that penalty, that financial penalty from the state of New York, was the fact that they had employees at Deutsche who dispositioned the alerts on Jeff Epstein and said he was just being a nice guy and he was just paying for these Eastern European women to go to school. And that was why they dispositioned the alert as not suspicious. And that to me stood out as an issue that we continuously have throughout every bank, small, big, credit union, fintech, crypto company, when we have people who assume the best about other people's intentions and then they end up dispositioning alerts that should have gone up the chain and instead they're silenced. Do you have any thoughts on whether or not some of the activities that Jeff Epstein was involved in, is that related to some of the threshold gaps that we have when it comes to CTRs and SARs, or even possibly a PEP view?
I don't see it as a threshold issue so much as it's a training and policy issue, and a perspective issue. Again, having people with a stake in the business dispositioning SARs, I mean, Deutsche deserved to get slapped around on that. It's wrong. It's just flat out wrong. Because every good AML analyst has a portion of them that's very cynical, very negative. You assume the worst and hope for the best. That's sort of a inquisitive, curious, cynical, all those sorts of attributes, which you saw none of in the Deutsche Jeffrey Epstein case.
Yes. Yes. So before we get to the topic of reputational risk, I want to talk about how we go about it. And I know that we all know how to Google search. The other day, I was looking for some information on a customer, and I wanted to know if there was a way to just see instantly risky or negative news on a particular subject. And I was particularly looking for funnel technology, and I was using Clear, and in just like a few seconds, there was a downloadable report, no copying. I didn't have to paste anything, and I love copying and pasting in the short keys. And I know that that would save a lot of us a lot of time, and it's another great way where technology can really help us. And that's why I like this product from Clear, from Thomson Reuters. The search here automatically looks for any risky things, including all the key priorities, and the score really is the key piece here. And it takes out the duplications in one page of results. I can easily see what's going on. It's clearly tied to pig butchering and sanctions. And that's why I really enjoy using a Thomson Reuters Clear product. So again, thank you to them for hosting, this, and allowing us to talk about these things in such a free way. We all know it doesn't come without cost. So we thank Thomson Reuters Clear product for this. So reputational risk. Is it even a thing anymore? That's really, I know that we kind of joked about that a couple of weeks ago when I was like, but what is risk really? Is it really even a thing? So I don't know, maybe we can go down that. I know we've seen a lot of publications since the new administration took office. Many of the federal banking agencies have posted, and there hasn't really been anything like a link that goes along with it. It's just like a statement of somebody acting, saying reputational risk is going to be removed. Reputational risk is no longer a priority. Can you walk us through that? Because I think it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and this administration, through an executive order, the president instructed the heads of the federal banking agencies to essentially remove reputation risk as one of the risks that they supervise to and examine for. Credit risk, operational risk, compliance risk, market risk, all of those, interest rate risk, all of those. The OCC and other agencies had added reputation risk a number of years ago, and now it's essentially removed. But it's an interesting concept to me, reputation risk, when it comes to financial services. Is it a risk to be managed? Or is it really just simply an asset to be preserved, right? Mm-hmm. And does reputation even matter, right? I can wrap my head around managing credit risk, managing market risk, all the various operational and compliance risks, including the regulatory side of AML. But I struggle, Sarah, with the concept of putting a program in place to manage reputation or reputational risk. You screw up managing credit risk and your reputation can suffer, right? Mm-hmm. Your ATMs go down because somebody miscoded something, operational error, your reputation can suffer. So,
yeah, and then you get hit with an AML consent order, your reputation can suffer there. The recent TD Bank, but also I mentioned Deutsche earlier. Those are good examples of reputational damage from an AML failure. So I don't know.
Yeah, and if TD's reputation suffered, in whose eyes did it suffer, right? Did customers close their accounts and move to another bank because of the media fallout from AML fines? Did the stock price take a hit? I took a look at it.
Yeah.
In the case of TD, its stock price was about $56, $57 when it got hit with those fines and all the media, et cetera, et cetera. A month later, $56, $57. Today, $76.
So clearly, there's not really an agent for change in this. So if stock price isn't a good measure of reputational risk, what do we manage? But we manage what we measure. Right. So then how do you measure reputational risk? Because you can't, it's not good to look at the stock price, because then if we were just to look at that change from 56 to 76 and take out the negative news, we would assume that they were doing something right. That whole time led to a $20 increase.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a great question of how do you measure, because you manage what you measure. And if you can't measure reputation risk, how do you manage it, right? So we can manage BSA risk because we can measure, for example, what percentage of our customers have all the required CIP data. Did moderate risk customers go through CDD like the policy says they should? Did high risk customers go through, on and on it goes. But reputation, how do we measure that, right? I mean, do you measure snarky TikTok clips being up 10%? Are militia groups posting 7% more threatening messages on Discord? Personally, I could care less about my bank's reputation as long as my mobile banking works, my ATMs are accessible, and I can Zelle money to my daughter.
So we may not be really losing anything with the regulators if we move away from assessing reputational risk. Is that what you're saying? That we might be better off, perhaps, I don't know, banks can now focus on the real threats and risks. That kind of takes us into another more recent news blurb from 2 weeks ago, or maybe three weeks ago, the executive order on debanking. Mm-hmm. I thought it was interesting. I know that major banking trade organizations, that they were very happy with that, and I don't necessarily agree. And I think for me, it puts in the crosshairs everything that we see as customer-based risk views, right? Like our lens by which we view a customer's transactional relationship with us. And I mean, it did not give me the warm and fuzzies. I did not understand the applauding from the banking lobbying agencies. I felt like it left a lot to interpretation of what an examiner is going to say is a legitimate way of exiting a business with somebody, and the reasons behind it. So if we use crypto as an example, are banks going to start feeling the heat if they say no or debank a crypto company? And what about the AML officer? What if they are in the middle of this and they can't tell everyone and their mom about why they exited a relationship because it could be the disclosure of a SAR filing or something even more like a national security letter. So what? They're stuck in the middle with no recourse. But I think the real question is it smart banking? And I don't know the answer to that question. I think minds like yours probably can answer it, because it just kind of pisses me off when I read the email. So I'm just going to stop talking, and then you just answer. Okay.
Well, the executive order, and it was August 7th, is titled "Guaranteeing Fair Banking for All Americans," and that's what the trade associations, talked about. And that's a good thing. Guaranteeing fair banking for all Americans. Can't complain about that. But it did turn CDD on its head. You can no longer have a risk strategy and a risk-based approach that says, as a financial institutions, we are not going to bank money service businesses. We just can't ramp up the required program for what usually is the sort of the least revenue product we sell, which is a transaction account, and satisfy all the requirements. Now, if the requirements go down, if the regulations change, I don't care about regulatory guidance. I want regulations change that allow banks to do less due diligence on high-risk entities such as money service businesses. Then this will work. But I think here's the key point, I think, Sarah, about this executive order, and something that very, very, very few people are talking about. The order actually talked about, it had two parts, okay? It started out with a riff by the president where he maligned some of the work that banks did in the wake of the January 6th, I still call it an insurrection. It apparently was a tourist event, gone awry now, but it was an insurrection. So he talked about that in the order. That's important. And then in the section 4 of the order, the first thing it did was it said to the bank agencies to stop treating reputation as a risk to be managed, okay, and to remove sort of politicized or unlawful debanking. Fair enough, and that's what the trade groups talked about. But the next section instructs the bank agencies, OCC, Fed, FDIC, etc., to scrutinize, and this is the language, scrutinize and take action against financial institutions, past or current, politicized or unlawful debanking. Those same trade groups were silent about that part of it. So I think there's potentially stifling impacts of this hunt for past debanking sins.
Mm-hmm.
Banks exited thousands of relationships as a result of the January 6th insurrection and the resulting 1,500 felons, convicted felons. But now that January 6th has been reframed as an overly energetic tourist event with heroic victims unjustly targeted by a rogue Department of Justice, all of those SARs and exits could result in regulatory actions going forward. That's nuts.
So what you're saying is that banks could be reluctant to file SARs or even exit relationships, even if in their policy they have a max SAR level, max number of SARs that they'll file, which has been up to their discretion. In fact, I've worked with banks that have been criticized in an exam because they don't have a limit by which they will then view, oh, I filed 15 SARs on this customer. I'm not getting any requests for for backup docs, and I want to exit. Now that's going to come into question, which means that they could be retaliated against in several years from now, maybe 2030. I don't know. I mean, is like anyone talking about that like fear now to either file SARs or exit, even though they clearly, I mean, if the bank doesn't have the right technology, the right people, the right, way in which they can take on higher risk businesses, or they do it and then they find out, oh crap, we're not very good at this. Let's exit this business because it's presenting too much risk to us and we're losing money, or, we have too much risk. Now the bank is almost stripped of that right to do so. And that, I don't know.
Right.
What do you say about that?
No, you're spot on. I think there is going to be a chilling effect. Now, to me, closing an account because of suspicious activity or too many SARs, whatever, closing an account is dumb. Exiting the relationship is smart, right? So let's say that Jim Richards does something untoward. A bank files SAR on me and they go to close my account. I'm just going to open up another account. But if they exit the relationship, then they're shifting the risk. They're not de-risking. They're de-risking them, but they're re-risking the industry because I'm just going to go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
But they should close the relationship. And this is where banks could get in trouble. Let's assume that I've got a joint account with Sarah, and Sarah and Jim have a business they run. Do you exit the business? Do you exit the joint relationship? Do you exit? What do you? And this is where this executive order, I think, is going to cause banks to have some issues. We need regulations. We need guidance.
Yeah, and I want to bring up something that Amy just posted in the comments here. She said from her view that the EO on debanking specifically mentions not exiting due to religious or politically motivated reasons. So if her bank doesn't want to bank businesses that have red awnings, a silly example, we can still do that if my bank does not have the resources to effectively monitor high risk businesses. And I don't know what your take on that is, but I love Amy. But I think for me, what I found was that was the brief definition they gave at the very beginning. And then the rest of the EO, to me, gave too much freedom for the federal banking agencies to decide whether or not a bank had political motivation, right? There's not enough guardrails to say, these are the factors that you have to consider in order for it to be considered as a unlawful debanking. And I think if we leave it up to federal banking agencies, it's going to be misinterpreted, meaning somebody could exit a firearms dealer because it exceeds their risk appetite, or because they filed SARS because there's shenanigans going on. But now the lawyer for that firearms business can come back and say, well, you de-risked us because you don't believe in Second Amendment rights. And the bank can go, no, 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 that's not the reason. But now they have to give a reason to the regulator and to the lawyer as to why they exited. So are we tipping off? Right? Is that the line we're playing with?
Right. And if you have a different interpretation of the Second Amendment than someone else, to the extent that you're not going to bank gun dealers, why is that political? Just because one political party happens to have that same position. It might not be a political position you're taking. You may feel that if you're a Minneapolis bank today, that you don't care for businesses that are selling assault rifles. And that's not something that you want to deal with as an institution. I don't know if you can make that blanket, we're not going to bank gun dealers. We're not going to bank the Proud Boys. We're not going to bank whoever, right? It's going to be, we need guidance. We need regulations, and we don't have it yet.
Yeah. And I think what would be really helpful, going to Amy's comment, is to have some type of, like, this is not an all-inclusive list, but this is a starter list of red flags that could indicate a politicized debanking move, right? And then have certain tasks there, but there was none of that. It's just kind of like, don't de-risk people unless you can tell them why you de-risk them, and it's a legitimate reason. It has nothing to do with religious beliefs or parties. And then also it's up to the federal banking agencies to figure it out. And I don't know.
It just, and then it gets trickier if, you say, we're not going to bank the National Rifle Association. We're just not, and we're not going to bank any state, county, local rifle associations. But do we want to give them a mortgage? Oh, a mortgage seems to be okay. What about a photocopied lease? That's okay. So it's really difficult. It's really complicated. And I think the more guidance, the more regulation we have on this, the more rules we have, bright line rules, I think the more helpful it will be.
Yeah. Okay. So let's I don't know, let's chat about our dream world. I like to live in the dream world. I like to live over there in that world. So I know you've posted a couple times, and I know we just talked about the customer versus the account level of how you view things, both from a transaction monitoring perspective as well as from a CDD perspective, rules versus principles, things like that. Could you paint like an ideal, effective AML regime from an FIU country level to the financial institution level? What would it look like from a customer versus account? I'm pretty sure we're on the same page on this, because I know we do a lot of chatting behind the scenes, and people don't know that we sit there and if our LinkedIn's ever got hacked, it wouldn't be great. But yeah, I don't know, maybe like walk through your view of customer and transactional, because I battle with this. I feel like too often, especially working with transaction monitoring technology providers, where they spend so much time risk rating the account that you like lose sight of who the customer is. And I don't know, but yeah.
But all those LinkedIn messages we trade, that's why we've shifted to Signal, though, right?
Exactly.
The two of us and Pete Hegseth. So I think let's start with transaction monitoring, okay? And which has never worked, never will work. It's inefficient, it's ineffective. So what I have said and written about many times is that single institution, customer and account-based transaction monitoring is neither efficient nor effective and has never worked. I'm very clear on that. And I'm also clear on what I think needs to replace it. And that is cross-institutional, relationship-based interaction surveillance.
Cross-institutional. I don't know, the part libertarian in me just cringes at that. But what do you mean by like multiple institutions? Like, so what, they share information? Is it anonymized? Like, are they working together on an investigation, something like, can you explain that a little bit more?
Yep. Working on an investigation together. Keep going. So that's
Okay, so
cross-institutional.
like it's a relationship based, so at the customer level, right, at the EIN level, rather than account based. So rather than look at account, you look at the relationship you have with the customer, which I think we all, which is what I just said, all accounts, the joints, etc. Right? Am I like on a
Oh, you're on a roll.
okay?
Keep
All right.
going. Keep going. Keep
Okay.
going. That's the
All
tough
right.
one now. Interaction surveillance rather than
Okay.
transaction monitoring.
Okay. So if I put on my fraud hat, because that is where I started in this crime career, was fraud. I can think of a bunch of customer interactions that are not transactional based, like somebody who checks an account balance, they, I don't know, log into their mobile app, they call into a phone center, if people still do that. I mean, I don't know, maybe people do. But you change your phone number, you change your email address, all these things that actually precede an actual fraudulent transaction, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So a transaction is when a customer interacts with their bank and moves value. An interaction is when a customer interacts with their bank without moving value. And we did a study years ago at the bank that I will not name, um, and found that a retail banking customer, the average retail banking customer, has 14 interactions for every 9 transactions. I don't know why 14 and 9, but that was
Hmm.
the way that my, you know, geniuses described it. But those 14 interactions are super valuable in understanding the 9 transactions.
Okay, so I take that as a monitoring doesn't work, but surveillance does?
Right. So
Okay,
interaction
okay,
surveillance. So yeah, I
okay.
don't think monitoring works and surveillance does. So surveillance is contextual.
Mhm.
Monitoring isn't, right? Surveillance compares your current activity with your past activity. It compares your activity with the activity of your peers. There's context, which is so much more important.
Okay, which I love that. I think one of my first big successful trainings I ever did was titled "The Contextual Awareness of High-Risk Customers." So I believe, and for me, that's where the human really fits in, is in that contextual component. So if we put it all together, financial institutions are going to work together. Good. I'm trying to go back to my first
Yeah,
statement. They're going to work together to look at all activity of all the related customers and then compare past activity and related activity. Yes, to the identified unusual activity, correct? Maybe? Did I
got it.
miss something?
No,
Okay.
you
All
got it.
right.
You got it.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, then that's good. And I think somebody posted here, he is right on the spot. A classic example is the 10,000 reporting threshold, especially for cross-border transfers. A customer can easily do more than 10,000 across 5 banks, and that it has accounts at. And that is 100% the case. I was just working with a client the other day, and I noticed that there were no 314B steps at all. And for me, 314B is at least the some of the patchwork we have in the meantime before we get to that true cross institutional stuff. I think the kind of clunkier way to do it is do the 314B, right? That's how you tap into that cross FI transactional activity. But it's astounding the number of financial institutions that are not registered with 314B. And then the burden that's on the large banks like Wells and Bank of America when they have to staff a 314B function just to field all the requests coming from the smaller banks and credit unions and fintechs and money service businesses asking for, hey, are they also doing that at your institution? So I don't know if you have thoughts on 314B, but for me, I tell all of my clients, like, if you don't register for 314B, that is toying with that line of a willful blindness. Like, you don't want to know the actual source of whatever flagged in your system. So you just don't want to register for 314B because you don't want to go send a request to Bank of America or Merrill Lynch or whoever to see the source or the purpose or the use of those funds. I don't know. Maybe that's too
Yeah.
harsh a stance on 314B.
Well, no, but 314B is voluntary.
Yeah.
And so why would you do something you don't have to do and possibly get in trouble with your regulators for not doing it perfectly?
Yeah.
Why not just not do it? Then you're not going to get into any trouble. Well, why not do it? I mean, you should do it, to your point, because it's the right thing to do. But it's really hard. And then the small institutions get frustrated with the big institutions who blow them off. The big institutions get frustrated with the small ones because they're, pestering them and stuff. It's expensive to do. Make it mandatory. Make it mandatory. Then you have to do it, and then everybody will do it, and everyone will do it well.
Yeah.
So that's my
And
opinion.
I think it'd be great to incentivize the tier 1 banks. If you're over a certain asset size and, here's a rebate or something, I don't know. There's some type of, offset to the taxes and the fees that the tier 1 banks pay because you're going to properly staff that 314B response function correctly. So these small banks that wait for months and months and months, will actually get a useful, helpful response in a timely manner. I mean, I think that would be, as long as I'm out there living in the dream world, that would be, that would be too bad.
And then 314B is information sharing.
Yeah.
It's not investigation sharing.
Yes.
We're not there yet. And that's sort of the next version of it.
Yeah. So one of the questions says, how does crypto, which is here to stay, affect those multiple interactions? And I think that goes back to your statement about what happened at the bank that you did not name, where they had 14 interactions. I'm sorry, nine interactions to 14 transactions.
14 interactions for every 9 transactions.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, in the crypto world, what interactions are there? I don't think there are any. I think are they all transactions?
Yeah. I mean, well, I think maybe, if you log into your crypto exchange and you change your phone number, your email, maybe. I don't know. I didn't know if the question was about that stat or maybe the 314B information sharing cross institutional. So if it's in that way, for me, crypto exchanges are registered. They are, they don't have to register because it's voluntary, but to make their bank partners happy, they should register for 314B. So then traditional financial institutions can reach out and say, hey, any shenanigans you're finding on this person?
Yeah, so, I think Coinbase, from what I understand, does a pretty good job with 314B and generally managing its BSA AML obligations. So
all right. So I want to get to the lightning round, and then there's a few more questions I want to get to. But I was trying to think back about all of the things that we talk about, which is everything that it has come out. I feel like we always have some type of interaction, not public, about some of these things. So I wanted to ask you some things, and then you ask me, and then we'll do our normal thing. Is that okay?
Back and forth. All right.
Okay.
Lightning round.
Yes.
Fire away.
So Southwest GTO, FinCEN, they took the CTR, their CTR threshold from $10,000 to $200 for certain MSBs. Just generic knee-jerk reaction to that. That's what I would like to see.
So it's going to be really tough for FinCEN to argue that the CTR threshold should be raised to $30,000 as proposed by a congressional bill, when they think $200 is appropriate along the southwest border. So that's my quick take. My turn. This is the lightning round, Sarah. So it's my turn.
Okay.
With all the chatter about a risk-based approach, isn't our AML regime chock full of rules?
Oh man. Rules versus a risk-based approach. I think it depends on the purpose of it, right? The CMIR, those thresholds, the CTR thresholds, the 30-day clock and for me, it's the nebulous 30-day clock for filing SARs, right? It's not boom, you get an alert, you have 30 days to work it. It's you have 30 days to file a SAR from the date at which your gut tells you that something's off. How do you define that? I don't know. So maybe that end of it is a little bit more risk-based, but we have a lot of rules. I mean, we have 465 pages in the exam manual. So like, I don't know. I feel like the rules-based approach, like we talked about on day one, the risk-based approach. I was dreaming for a second. The risk-based approach, like we talked about on day one, is um, an overused, misunderstood, misapplied statement. And I feel like it's almost a way in which some institutions, some regulatory agencies like to hide behind their lack of operational knowledge. Oof,
Yeah.
that's probably a little too harsh, but that's
Yeah.
my knee. Yeah. I mean, that's my knee jerk reaction when I see federal banking agencies and they make these, 3-sentence statements on LinkedIn. And then they say, it is important that community institutions employ a risk-based approach. And I'm like, and,
Right. I mean, it's
and
like if you're driving down the highway and
yeah.
it says speed limit, it
Mhm.
depends.
Yeah.
What? Just give me a speed limit.
Right.
I'll exceed it anyway, but just give
Yes.
me a speed limit. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
um,
Okay. So now I get to ask you a
okay.
crypto question.
Ooh,
So industry brags that I think it's 0.3% is illicit
mhm,
crypto activity. And I know you, Allison Jimenez, Natalie Loebner, and we talk about this a lot. And by we, I mean the three of you guys really have a lot to say. And I just sit there and watch because it's just incredible. Um, so way more money is laundered through fiat than crypto. And that's kind of like what we hear. So, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's
yeah.
true? Do you think it's not true? I don't
Well,
know.
it's true and it's not true. So when the crypto industry says only 0.3%, that sounds pretty good, right? 99.7% is not illicit activity. But it's the rate of illicit activity. And I've done a ton of research on this and I've published it all, and no one has ever refuted it. And my research comes up with that the highest possible rate of illicit fiat activity is 0.0, can't see my thumb there, 0.00002%. Okay?
How
Where
many
the
zeros?
four zeros, 2.00002%, while the lowest possible rate of illicit crypto activity is 0.3%. So that's like 0.30000, sorry, 0.000%, or
Wow.
30,000 would be that number. 3 followed by 4 zeros versus 2.00002 versus 3.3. So I'll put it this way because that didn't make any sense. For every $1 million of crypto activity, 3,200 is illicit. For every $1 million of total fiat activity, 2 cents is illicit.
Wow.
So, but
Huh.
yes, there's way more illicit fiat activity than illicit
Yeah.
crypto because there's way, way, way more fiat activity in total than crypto activity. So,
Interesting. Yeah.
my question, lightning round,
Oh
civil
boy.
money penalties, do they work?
I almost feel like tossing this back to you only because I feel like I'm going to quote you in this. So, I mean, I would like to say yes. Now, I think there's two categories of response here. One are the large banks, like the large global banks, and the rest of the penalties are for the smaller banks. So I will answer differently. For the large banks, I'm going to quote you, and it's not a direct quote, but I know you say this a lot, which is every time a penalty comes out, you go right into the math and you go, great, their penalty is 0.0000189% of their earnings from like 6 days or something, right? And I think in those cases, you are spot on, and history proves that you're correct, right? That is not an agent for change in those large global banks. penalties leveled at smaller community institutions, and by community, I mean not tier one, so community or regional banks, especially community banks. I'll speak to that. I think yes. However, we don't see CMPs too much for small community banks. And the one we did, I think last year, was kind of a bananas one. Like the penalty for them was more than their asset size. You remember that one?
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
like 20, they were like 25 million in assets. And I think their
Community
penalty was like
community
20.
bank of yeah, community
Yeah.
bank of Weir.
Yeah.
Yeah, CWB.
So yeah, I mean, that's kind of an anomaly. But I think CMPs can work, but I think there's a different way in which community banks do see that agent for change. Because I would hope that a CMP is actually supposed to be used as an agent of change, or an agent for change, rather. And they are penalizing them because they want them to stop, right? Like a parent, right? You are a parent, I'm a parent, right? You have certain punishments, certain consequences for your kids when they don't do what you've asked them to do. And I feel like that's the purpose of the CMP, right? Instead of spanking them, we slap them with the
Right.
CMP.
But
But yes, go
but
on.
staying with the parent analogy,
Yeah.
right? It's the shareholders of the bank that are paying the fine.
Yes, that's also a
And
good point.
it's the malfeasance of of management
Yeah.
that caused the fine that's paid by the shareholders. So it's like your teenage son gets a speeding ticket and you pay the fine.
Yeah.
That's not going to change your son's behavior if he knows that dad's going to pay the speeding tickets. He's just going to
Oh,
continue to drive like an idiot. So that's
that's
my
true.
gripe, is that it's management that failed to do something. It's management should pay. Now, yes, the shareholders can pay their share in a
Yeah.
fine, but management has to be held accountable, and the directors have to be held accountable. And management is rarely held accountable. Directors are never held accountable. It's
Yeah.
always the shareholders. That has to change.
Yeah, I would agree. So then I guess what what would be the best agent for change if it's not money, if it's not a penalty? I mean, I know that we've talked about this, and I think I posted on an AML intelligence article a few weeks ago when they had put a former banker in prison in Europe, and I thought, I'm getting some FOMO here, right?
Yeah.
Like, why? I mean, if they aren't going to respond to severe amounts of billions of dollars, like what happened last year, what is I don't
Well,
know.
I think back in 2018, Wells Fargo got hit with some sanctions for their sales practices, opening up those unauthorized consumer accounts. They were fined $3 billion, but the Federal Reserve also imposed an asset cap.
Mhm.
The $3,000 was a check that they wrote. Done with it. Simple. But that asset cap really hurt Wells Fargo, and it hurt them for a long time. That asset cap wasn't lifted
Yeah.
until this year. So that type of thing hurts. Clawing back senior management compensation, deferred compensation, pulling that back, putting an unfriendly director on the board that's going to give them a bad time for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Those monitors are very punitive.
Mhm.
So it's a lot of other things they could do, either
Yeah.
instead of fining the shareholders or in addition to fining the shareholders.
Yeah. So I want to get, because we have just about 5, 6 minutes left. I want to get to a few of the questions. I know we've answered several, and people keep chiming in with their comments that aren't necessarily questions, but I wanted to at least get to one question here, which I think is a good one. How do we reconcile these, best or most effective practices with what is traditionally expected of financial institutions via their examiners, considering limited resources? So I would assume that, this person asking this is in an operational role. And that's a fair question. Great. Like, we have us sitting up here saying these are ineffective and this is what you should do that's more effective. And then their examiners are asking them to do something completely different and typically highly inefficient and ineffective. How does one balance that? I don't know. How did you balance that at your
Well,
previous jobs?
Um, Probably the most valuable resource that a BSA officer has. You're often talking, what are your resources? Oh, I've got 200 people, or I've got 25 people. No, your most valuable resource is your relationships, and your relationships with your regulators. My experience with regulators around the world and with multiple regulators in the United States is that they're reasonable, good, well-meaning people, that if you have a good relationship with them, they will listen to you, they will adapt, they will understand. Um, so it's when you don't have that good relationship that you can get some difficulties with the relationship itself, and come up with some things that are really, really hard for you to do. Now, I had that lots of times. We had a big monitoring of home equity lines of credit. Never, 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 ever had anything suspicious, but we still had to do it because we couldn't have it not covered. It didn't make any sense, but we had to do it anyway. So I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, I think it does. And I think, some of the angst I hear from community bank AML officers is that, they've tried to operationalize, they've tried to move past the clunky systems that we talked about on day one, where the regulators are happy with them dispositioning, 10,000 alerts a month and only producing 10 new SARs out of that, right? Because they're used to that high number of alerts. So anytime they take any drastic measures to reduce those false positives to get something that's highly effective, examiners go crazy. And I think that is part of the issue. And there was a bipartisan bill, I don't know where it is, but the Fair Exams Act. And I liked that from the aspect that I felt like it gave a whistleblower-ish, not true whistleblower, but some type of path where a bank could say, hey, this federal bank examiner is being crazy with what they're requesting of us. We've already provided all of this. Here is what the exam manual says. Here is what we're doing. And they still, it's like a dog with a bone. And I don't know how many times I hear this stuff. So I would assume that the person who asked that question is kind of in that position where your regulators are just asking for, essentially stupid stuff because that's what they're used to. And you're trying to show them something new and better, and they just aren't up for it. And I don't know how to change that. I don't know.
Yeah, it's tough. No, it's tough if you have a local person who's struggling.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just unfortunately have to sort of go over their head and risk ruining the relationship even more. But the examiner in charge or somebody in DC can probably help you out in a situation like that.
Yeah. So I want to, there is one more question that I think is a good one, and then we'll close out. So they are asking, can you shed some light on how far banks should go in doing due diligence? This person has several community bank audit clients that they think, all caps, should be buying a system that expands their suspicious activity monitoring efforts to follow the money once it gets transferred to a cryptocurrency exchange. And I would assume these are the analytics, right? These analytics companies that some traditional financial institutions assume that they start having to use because their clients are now using the bank to be the off-ramp, or rather the on-ramp to crypto. Since the money leaves their traditional financial institution, shouldn't they stop the monitoring there? I think that's a great discussion point. I think it's almost a 314B-ish, but not, because you're actually taking on the cost and the expense of staffing and having to prove that, what you're doing is right. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't know how you would. I'm just sitting here thinking about this. So I've got a regular bank account. I've got an account at Coinbase. Does my bank, and if I move money from my bank over to my Coinbase account, I'm getting phishing calls on my phone. I am actually. I just looked at the voicemail that they left me. It's a phishing call. Awesome.
Oh my goodness.
But does my bank care what I then do with that? On Coinbase, whether I buy Trump coin or Bitcoin or whatever I buy, and how would they monitor that? Because that's not done on chain. It's just done within the confines of Coinbase's ledgers. So
Yeah.
I'm not too sure what that would do
Yeah.
for a community bank.
I totally agree with you there. I think the only time that that type of technology is useful is if that is a banking as a service type of operation that you are onboarding crypto companies of different kinds. That you should have some type of technology in terms of a third party risk management extra tool, but not if just simply you're not in BaaS, right? You're not in banking as a service, and you just have customers that are doing that. I don't, I would totally agree with you on that. That's
Yeah,
not something, yeah.
and I'm not going to give my bank my
Right.
Bitcoin wallet address.
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's almost all the questions. I know that we had talked about having more of the firing round questions, but I think some of the live questions that we took here would be really helpful. Before we go, there was one where somebody did ask for the link to your research about the percentages of illicit activity in crypto versus fiat. So I know that you posted about that on your LinkedIn, right? Can that person go to your LinkedIn and find it?
It's go to my antimoneylaundering.wtf. No, Google antimoneylaundering.wtf and the phrase dogs are more dangerous than snakes. Okay, so that's Google that phrase. Dogs are more dangerous than snakes, and
I love that.
antimoneylaundering.wtf, and you'll find that blog post.
Oh my goodness, I love it. Well, thank you so much. I know you are a busy man, and you gave me 2+ hours of your week, so I am eternally grateful. Thank you, and I will
My
see you
pleasure.
in November when we get to take the stage together in
Yeah.
Denver. So I look forward to that. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you to Thomson Reuters and Illicit Edge. We had a great time, a successful two days. Please find us on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you, and have a great day.
Cheers. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks.